The first step is to download your pattern. Select your file according to your paper format and the size you wish to make. Print your pattern at 100% scale. There is a scale test included on the first page of the pattern to ensure you have printed correctly. Trim the borders and stick together using clear sticky tape. There is a printed layout included in the instruction guide to show you how to put all of the pages together correctly. Then, trim around each individual pattern piece. Using your iron, adhere a medium weight fusible interfacing to the wrong side of your main fabric. Fusing will bulk up your fabric, giving your garment more structure and stability, as well as making it easier to sew. Place your pattern pieces onto the fabric. Follow the individual cut instructions on each of the pattern pieces. Pin in place and then cut according to the marked instructions. Pin the front pieces together. Start with the two centre front pieces and then work your way to the middle front and then lastly to the side front. Pin so that the wrong sides are touching one another and the notches are matching up along the way. Continue until all of the front pieces are pinned together. Next, stitch these seams together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure you take your time to go carefully around the curves. Use your iron to press all of the seams open. This is a very important step, so don't skip it. Now we will start attaching the boning. I am using a 6 mm or 1/4 inch flexible sew-in boning. I'll be adding it to my middle front and side front seams, but if you wish to add it to your centre front seam, feel free. With your scissors, cut neatly around the boning edge so that it is a nice soft curve. This will improve the comfort of the finished garment. Line up your boning to the middle of the inside of your seam. You want the boning to begin 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch below the top edge. Pin the boning in place directly in the middle of the seam. Chop it off at the end. It should finish 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch above the seam edge. Continue pinning so it is held in place all the way down the seam. Repeat this for all of the seams that you'd like to have boning. When we stitch the boning in place, we will be stitching on the right side of the garment, directly in the centre of the seam. Take your time here to ensure that your stitch line is neat, so that the stitching will be undetectable from the right side of the garment. Again, repeat this for all of the seams that have boning. You'll also notice I'm very careful to remove all of my pins as I sew. You don't want to break a needle here. Now you can see all my boning is stitched in place with no visible stitching line from the right side of the garment. Give everything a really good press flat. Place the back pieces on top of the front pieces with the right sides touching one another. You want to make sure the edge with all the notches is closest to the centre back of the garment. Match up along the shoulder seam and pin in place. Stitch together using a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You'll now repeat all of these steps up until this point for your lining pieces. Just don't attach boning to the lining as we have already attached it to the main. Now that your front and back pieces are stitched together, place the lining pieces on top of your main pieces with the right sides touching one another. Pin in place all the way along the neck edge as well as all the way along the armholes. Make sure you match up all of the seams as well as all of the notches along the way. Stitch along the neckline and armholes using a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. Your centre back, side seams and bottom edge should still all remain unstitched at this point. Using your scissors or a small set of snips, clip into the curves. This will help the garment sit flat when turned through to the right side. Just be careful not to accidentally cut into the seam allowance. You don't want to break the stitching. Next, pull the garment through to the right side. You'll notice I'm working from the front of the bustier, pulling through the back of the garment. This step is a little tedious, but just take your time to get it all through to the right side. You'll then repeat this for the other side of the back, so the whole garment is flipped through. The next step is to press all of these edges flat. Again, this is a very important step, so please don't skip it. Now it's time to stitch each of the side seams together. Open out each of the side seams and match the main fabric together all the way through to the lining. Then, of course, repeat this for the other side seam. Stitch along this seam using a 1cm or 3/8 inch seam allowance. Then repeat this for the other side. Open out the centre back seam. You'll be working on the main layer only. Pin your trim along the top edge at the first notch to create a loop. The loop should extend 1cm or 3/8 inch beyond the seam allowance, 2 cm or 3/4 inch in total length. Continue creating loops at all 5 of the notches on one side, and then repeat for the other side of the centre back. Stitch along the loops 1cm or 3/8 inch from the edge to secure the loops in place. You can back tack over the loops a few times to make sure they're extra secure, as there'll be a lot of pressure pulled on these. Fold the lining down on top of the main so that the right sides are together and the loops are concealed on the inside. Pin in place. Then continue pinning along the bottom edge of the garment, tucking the garment into itself as you go. Then, finally, pin along the other centre back seam where the loops are. Stitch together along the centre back seam using a 1cm or 3/8 inch seam allowance, and continue stitching along the bottom edge using a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just make sure you leave a 7.5cm or 3 inch opening along the bottom edge so that we can turn through the garment in the next step. Using your scissors or a small pair of snips, clip around the curved edge. This will help the hem edge sit nice and flat once we turn it through in the next step. Pull the garment through the small opening we left. Take time and care here to ensure you don't distort the boning too much. Using your iron, press along all the edges so that your bustier is nice and flat. You can also see I'm pinning closed the small opening that we've left. Using a hand sewing needle and thread, stitch the opening closed. Ensure you only pick up a few of the fabric threads at a time so that the hand sewing stitch is completely invisible. Using the remainder of your trim, thread it through the loops. Start at the top and work your way down the corset to create a crisscross effect. I've attached a safety pin at the end of my trim to make it easier to pull it through the loops. You're all done. It's time to try on your garment.